concerning the top two candidates for president.
I'm really underwhelmed by our options this year.
Julie Pereira made her views on a political sign exceptionally loud and clear.
It said "F them both," which I thought was both very poignant about the times and our choices, as well as I thought it was a little bit funny, and so did some of my neighbors.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back to Southern Draw Law. My name is James White, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor, former police officer. Well, it is that time. It is the time where once every 4 years, we are all called to do our civic duty, go to the polls, and vote for whoever we believe would be the best candidate for president, or I think most of us are probably voting against the candidate that we would rather not be in office, as opposed to voting for a candidate that is actually our preference. That seems to be the trend of the way things have gone over the last few elections. But an interesting thing happened over the summer, and I intentionally delayed talking about this, and I'll explain that more in the closing. But over the summer, I had an email that came through from an incredible subscriber of mine who has been on board and totally supported my channel from the very beginning. Her name is Sarah, and she goes by the username Freddy Spaghetti, and you'll see her pretty prominently in the comment section if you look back over the course of the videos on my channel. Fred sent me a story that aired on the Channel 5 Nashville news station, and you may have heard about this. And again, I had this loaded up and ready to talk about it, but a thing happened, and we'll all be familiar with it when I go through it in the closing. But essentially, I decided to abandon the idea of talking about this video at the time. But essentially what happened was, you have a lady whose name is Julie, I believe it's Pereira, but I don't want to butcher it, so I'm only going to say it one time. But Julie decided that she was not pleased with either candidate in the race, and this was back before Kamala Harris was the nominee for president, and it was still Joe Biden. So in order to express her displeasure with the options that we all have as Americans, she put up the following sign in her yard to try to voice her opinion on what she thought about the candidates for the 2024 election. So as you can see, Julie wasn't really happy with either of the options available to us as voters. And so she put this sign up, and the city of Lakeland took an issue with that. And they have taken issues with multiple signs that she's put up in the past, and they have fined her for different signs that she's put up in the past. But this one particularly, they had a real issue with it because it contained a certain four-letter word that we're all familiar with. And so they decided to fine her and to give her civil penalties every single day that she didn't adhere to their policy. Well, Julie decided that she believed more in free speech than she did in her local city government telling her what she could do with her words and her viewpoints, and so she decided to file a lawsuit. And so we're going to listen to the news story put on by Channel 5. This is not going to be a political post. In fact, it is the opposite of a political post, because I don't care who you vote for. I personally just care that you vote. I don't care who you vote for at all. Julie doesn't think we ought to vote for either one of them, and that is A-okay with me too, because she has a First Amendment right to say what she said, and now the city of Lakeland is having to agree with her. So let's take a look at the news story, and we'll come back and talk about what happened.
Almost as ubiquitous as the American flag, the American front yard has long been a place where homeowners have spoken loud and clear on issues like gun reform, Black Lives Matter, support for a school, or support for a cause, and especially every 2 years, support for political candidates. Which brings us to an issue in a West Tennessee town.
That's the biggest lie that he's a 6 handicap of all.
I was an 8 handicap.
Yeah.
Concerning the top two candidates for president.
I'm really underwhelmed by our options this year.
Julie Pereira made her views on a political sign exceptionally loud and clear.
It said "F them both," which I thought was both very poignant about the times and our choices, as well as I thought it was a little bit funny, and so did some of my neighbors.
But other neighbors apparently didn't. They complained to the city of Lakeland, Tennessee. A codes officer gave her a warning for the forceful, flashy, flagrant French on the sign in her yard, followed by a citation.
And I've always been very expressive, and that's not just, in my verbal communication, but also like we decorate our house for every holiday.
And Julie's not kidding. Last Christmas, Julie set up a display from the movie National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, complete with a famous phrase from the film indicating the maxed out capacity of the lavatory on Cousin Eddie's RV.
Well, we had a outhouse theme going for Christmas this year. That's kind of a long story.
The city cited Julie for that, too. But while the city eventually settled with Julie on that case, they asked a judge to decide this one, eventually ruling for Julie. Her attorney, Nashville's Daniel Horwitz, says while some words might be offensive, it doesn't necessarily make them obscene, and that classifies them in this case as protected political speech in the United States. Or in other words,
being able to tell politicians to themselves is a sacred American right.
A sentiment that couldn't be any clearer. Jason Lamb, News Channel 5.
Now, towards the end of the news story, the reporter actually said something that was a little bit misleading, probably unintentionally, but the reporter indicated that instead of settling with Julie, Lakeland, Tennessee decided that they wanted a judge to decide. But actually, as we're going to go through here in just a minute, what actually happened was everybody still came to an agreement, and they asked the judge to approve a consent decree, which is just a written list of terms for a settlement. And so they actually did, in fact, settle. But it's an interesting thing, so we're going to look through it, and I'm going to pull up the document, and we'll look through the complaint, and we'll look through some of the things that are said in the consent decree and figure out exactly how this thing settled out. So we can pull up Julie's official complaint here, filed by attorney Daniel Horwitz. And it basically says, dissatisfied with Joe Biden and Donald Trump, the two major political party candidates who are seeking to be elected to President of the United States in 2024, the plaintiff posted a sign in her front yard. Political message on the plaintiff's sign speaks simply and cogently for itself. And as you can see, it certainly does. The city of Lakeland, Tennessee didn't like the political sign. And they also tried to forbid the plaintiff's sign under its municipal code. In particular, the city of Lakeland and its code enforcement officers, defendant Katrina Shields, believe that the plaintiff's political sign violates the city of Lakeland sign regulations that prohibit statements of obscene, indecent, or immoral character. And it goes through this. You guys, I'm going to leave a link to it. You guys can read it for yourself. But essentially, what this complaint does is it goes through and it highlights the fact that whenever she essentially made the U of the word F-U-C-K an asterisk, the city was satisfied that she had obscured the word enough. And so what it boiled down to, and the way that the plaintiff did this was really smart, because she would come into compliance by obscuring the sign, and then she would take the modifications off the sign and show it again. And every single time the city took issue with it, and then when she modified it again, they were fine with it. Essentially, what this complaint works through is sort of the trajectory of it. What would happen is the plaintiff would take some tape and create like an asterisk over the second letter in the word, and then the city would say, okay, that's fine. And then she would take it away because she would become irritated, and the city would say, no, you're out of compliance again. And so what that did was it allowed her to create documented isolation of the word fuck, just to try to illustrate that the only problem that the city actually had was with that particular word. And what was smart about that is because it was actually a case from California called Cohen from, I think, 1971. And you're probably familiar with it, but a person wore out in public a jacket that said, fuck the draft. And of course, somebody tried to make him take it off. And ultimately, the court came to the determination that you can't call a single word in the English language obscene. It's a viewpoint discrimination. And so what the plaintiff was able to do through her attorney was use the way that she came in and out of compliance with the city ordinance and their subsequent response to her action as a way to isolate the issue down to simply one word. And then she was able to use that in her complaint to show that really the only issue that the city had was with that one particular word. And that was a viewpoint and content-based discrimination through their municipal ordinance. And as applied to her, it was unconstitutional. Now, again, you have to remember that when you challenge the constitutionality of the statute, You can challenge it on its face, meaning how it's applied to anybody, or it can't be rescued constitutionally speaking, or you can challenge the way that it was specifically applied to you. And so what happened was she filed this complaint, and ultimately the city of Lakeland agreed that the way that it was applied to the plaintiff was unconstitutional. And as a result, you have a consent decree that both parties asked the judge to approve. And in the consent decree, it lays out what the actual settlement was. And we're going to go ahead and look at that now and go through it. Okay, so we have final order and consent decree in Julie Pereira versus the city of Lakeland, Tennessee, and Katrina Shields. So pending before the court is the plaintiff's verified complaint against the defendant, city of Lakeland, and Katrina Shields, in her official capacity as code enforcement officers. As evidenced by the signatures of adversary counsel below, all matters in controversy have been settled and compromised, and subject to the court's approval, parties agree to the following conclusive resolution. Number one, the plaintiff posted a sign in her front yard concerning the 2024 presidential election, which reads, "Fuck them both" in 2024, and received a citation for the defendants for violating the City of Lakeland's municipal code, which prohibits, among other things, signs that contain statements of an obscene, indecent, or immoral character, which would offend public morals or decency. And then, again, the case we referenced earlier, under Cohen versus California, which was a United States Supreme Court case from 1971, the plaintiff's political sign is not obscene, and the defendants may not lawfully regulate it based on the viewpoint it expresses. Number three, for these reasons, the court declares unconstitutional the defendant's enforcement action against the plaintiff for displaying her unredacted political yard sign, a copy of which is set forth in the record at document 1-1. The defendants are thus permanently enjoined from taking any further enforcement action against the plaintiff for displaying her unredacted political yard sign. Permanently enjoined means you may never do this again. You have to stop it forever. Within 30 days of the entry of this order, the defendant shall reimburse the plaintiff $688, which constitutes all the fines levied against her and expenses that she's incurred for displaying the political yard sign. Number five, the defendant shall pay the plaintiff nominal damages in the amount of $1 for violating the plaintiff's First Amendment rights. Number six, pursuant to 42 U.S.C. 1988b, the plaintiff shall be awarded reasonable attorney's fees in the amount of $31,000 and costs in the amount of $811.75 payable to Horowitz Law Firm within 30 days of the entry. And this order constitutes the final judgment of this action. So for those of you who, when we're talking about civil rights cases, and I'll make a statement or some other lawyer will make a statement, well, they really don't have a lot of damages. I get people that go crazy in the comments over that statement as if it's like my preference or something. They're like, well, isn't the violation of the Fourth Amendment damages enough? No, it's not. It's not. I wish it was. I wish that every single time that somebody retaliated against somebody's First Amendment rights, there was an automatic $100,000 strict liability fine. I wish that was the case. I wish it was the case that there was a set number of damages for every single time that a right was violated that's well grounded in the law. But that is not the way it works. The plaintiff was awarded nominal damages. That's $1, nominal damages of $1, just so she can say she won. And that's all it is. It's literally a bragging right. Okay, that's what nominal damages mean. So the actual First Amendment violation, this lady went through months of dealing with these people, had to do a bunch of stuff to try to, jump through their hoops and all that stuff, had to hire a lawyer, file a lawsuit, incur $31,000 worth of legal fees to get nominal damages. So when I'm talking about, well, they don't really have damages, meaning they didn't get beat up, they don't have medical expenses, they're not out a bunch of money, they didn't lose their job, they didn't, there's no quantifiable damage to that person that can be reimbursed. That's what I'm talking about. If you don't incur some monetary penalty as a result of the action taken against you, you're only going to get nominal damages. It's not the way I would have it, but it's the reality. So for you guys that want to lose your minds every time I say, well, there wasn't a lot of damages, the answer is no. Whether you like it or not, that's not how it works. If there's no monetary loss, there aren't very many damages. And damages determines whether or not a law firm is going to take a case, because it's not always the case that you get reimbursed attorney's fees. And so you have a case where somebody gets their First Amendment violated for a retaliation arrest, or their Fourth Amendment violated or whatever, and they're not out any damages. And, the attorney has to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to litigate that case and dump their time in it at so much per hour. And not every case is awarded attorney's fees as part of the judgment. And had this thing gone to trial, there's no way to tell whether there would have been attorney's fees rewarded, because this was ultimately a settlement. And more than likely, it was a settlement where the city of Lakeland was like, look, we're going to have to spend at least $30,000 on our own lawyers to go litigate this case so we can ultimately lose. So if we're going to be out $30,000 for that, we might as well pay the lawyer $30,000 and give this lady the win and let her move on and display her sign. And that's probably what happened. So, don't get mad at me for telling you what the reality is. That's kind of the reason I'm here, is to share what I understand about the criminal justice system with people who aren't necessarily privy to that kind of information. Overall, I'm glad this lady sued. I'm glad she decided that she wasn't going to put up with it. I'm glad she wanted to get her viewpoint out there, and she was willing to go find a lawyer, pay them out of her pocket to sue. Not everybody can do that, and I understand that, but I'm glad that she stood up for her First Amendment rights, and I'm glad that ultimately she sued the code enforcement officer, and the city of Lakeland had to admit that it was wrong, and they are not able to do any enforcement action against her for using this political sign in the future. All that said, I acknowledge that it is a crappy system, but that's the system we have. In closing, I mentioned earlier that I had this video idea queued up because back in July or June or whenever it was, my subscriber, Sarah, wrote me and told me about this story. And I looked it up and I thought it was a great story and a great win for free speech. But something happened. And that something was that Donald Trump got shot at a rally. And I'm not getting political. I don't care how you feel about Donald Trump. I don't care how you feel about Kamala Harris or Joe Biden. What we should do, every single American should unite, regardless of whether or not you like the person who's had someone try to take their life. We should all stand united against that. There is no room in our culture, there's no room in our country for political violence, and I would feel the same way about it if Joe Biden had been shot, or Kamala Harris had been shot, or Barack Obama had been shot, or Hillary Clinton had been shot, as I do about the fact that Donald Trump was shot. Regardless of who you're voting for, we should not condone political violence of any kind. And the reason that I didn't do that video in that moment was because it just seemed irresponsible. It seemed irresponsible to make light of something that had serious consequences at the time. And I try to do what I think is the right thing every single time. It wasn't somehow to show credence to any one particular candidate or anything like that. It was simply that I thought making light of the situation would be an irresponsible thing to do. And the timing of that story coming out just didn't line up with what I thought would be an appropriate way to cover that story and still not make light of what happened in the assassination attempt. So now that some time's passed and we've retreated back into our tribalism enough that we can start pointing fingers at each other again and dislike the other side, I feel like, the election's Tuesday. Everybody's probably made up their mind or probably already voted. If you're an avid voter or you really value the right to vote, you've probably already even cast your vote, and that's fine. But I thought on the cusp of the election might be a great time just to talk about this story, highlight a win for the First Amendment, and just let it resonate with you guys. So regardless of who you're voting for, I do encourage you to vote. Hopefully your candidate wins. Hopefully you'll be happy about the outcome. I realize that can't be true for all of us, but that we vote, I think, is more important than who we vote for. As many of you know, I've decided to reject the membership model for my particular channel due to what I consider to be the exorbitant fees that the platform takes of your hard-earned money when you choose to donate to any channel. As a result, the only way that you can support the channel is through either a PayPal link that I'm going to put up or a Venmo link. Please don't feel obligated. I don't expect or believe I'm entitled to anything from you, but should you want to support the channel, I'll leave a link up for you to be able to make a donation. If not, no big deal. Please continue to enjoy the free content that I put out. I do it so that I can try to help and try to educate people on things that maybe they don't already have a good understanding of. So that's what I'm here for. That's the entire mission of the channel. And I hope that it lands on you and resonates with you in the way that I intend. That's all for this one, guys. Thank you for taking the time to watch it. Please remember to like and subscribe and leave a comment on the video. Check out some of the other videos on the channel and leave a comment on there as well. Until I see you again, take care. Always film your interactions with the police and keep your evidence to yourself.